It's a cold January afternoon in the heart of New York City, where the bustle of the streets and the glare of towering skyscrapers create a world of contrast. The rich hum of luxury vehicles and expensive shopping districts blends with the quieter sounds of people struggling to survive, those whose lives are invisible to the masses. The streets are alive with the chatter of pedestrians, but if you listen closely, you'll hear the shuffling footsteps of someone who doesn't quite belong in this picture. A man with ragged clothes and a weathered face, his eyes tired from years of hardship. This man, whose name we'll come to know soon enough, is homeless. He stands on a busy street corner, a cardboard sign at his feet reading simply, "Anything helps." His hands are trembling, his stomach empty, his dreams long abandoned in the cracks of the city's concrete. It's a typical day in a city that has a way of swallowing up its own. But little does he know, today won't be typical. Today, the intersection of his life with that of Barron Trump will unfold in a way that no one could have predicted. What would you do if you found yourself asking for $1 on a street corner, only to have the very son of a former president stand before you? That's the question on the edge of the story. How would you respond to someone who has lived a life you'll never fully understand? In a world so far removed from your own, yet somehow connected by the thin thread of fate. The homeless man, whose name is Jack, holds out his hand toward a sleek black car that's pulling up to the curb. Inside, Barron Trump, the son of former President Donald Trump, is looking out the window, his face obscured by the tinted glass. The driver slows, as if to decide whether to stop, and Jack, having lived a life that has taught him to never expect anything, has no real hope that this moment will change his fate. But what happens next is not what anyone could have predicted. Chapter. Doors open and Barron steps out. What happens when two worlds collide in a way no one expects? What's the price of a single dollar, and what happens when it carries more weight than anyone could imagine? The wind bites at Jack's face, and his coat, threadbare, patched in several places, does little to shield him from the chill. He stands in his usual spot by the corner of Fifth Avenue, next to a crowded cafe. The smell of fresh coffee drifts past him, a reminder of comforts he hasn't known in years. His stomach growls, an echo of his hopelessness. There's no telling how long it's been since his last meal. Days, maybe longer. Jack's fingers, stained from years of living on the street, hold his cardboard sign up higher, but his eyes are focused elsewhere. He's used to ignoring the world around him. But today, something feels different. He can't quite place it, but there's a buzzing in the air, a tension, like a storm waiting to break. And then, in the midst of the endless sea of passers-by, he spots him. The car pulls up slowly, the sleek black sedan standing out amongst the yellow cabs and beat-up trucks. Jack's eyes narrow as the vehicle comes to a stop in front of him, a wave of sudden recognition washing over him. He doesn't know why it's him, or why, of all the people in the city, this is the moment that fate has chosen. But Jack knows. He knows the man in the car. Barron Trump. At first, Jack wonders if it's a mirage. Barron, the son of one of the most controversial presidents in recent history, standing right before him. The young man, barely out of his teens, tall and composed, looks almost out of place in this neighborhood. There's no mistaking it. He's unmistakable. His sharp jawline and quiet intensity making him instantly recognizable. Jack's heart skips a beat. His mind races. What should he do? The man in front of him, born into a life of wealth and privilege, has been insulated from the struggles of the people on the streets like Jack. And yet here they are, two strangers about to cross paths in a way that will change everything. Barron steps out of the car with slow, measured movements, adjusting his jacket as if he's not entirely sure what to do in a place like this. His presence draws the attention of a few pedestrians, but most keep their heads down. After all, New York City is full of rich people passing through on their way to the next meeting, the next event. It's just another day in the big city. But for Jack, this is no ordinary day. He takes a step forward, instinctively holding out his hand as he's done countless times before. But this time, it feels different. The words come out awkwardly, his voice raspy from not speaking much the past few days. "Excuse me, sir. Any spare change?" "$1 would help," Jack says, barely above a whisper. Barron pauses. His eyes flicker briefly to the sign in Jack's hand, then meet Jack's eyes. Those tired, weathered eyes that have seen far too much. For a split second, time seems to stretch, as though both men are suspended in that moment, caught between two worlds. Jack expects the usual, an uncomfortable glance, a quick walk away, maybe even an apology for not having any cash. But instead, Barron does something completely unexpected. He doesn't turn away. He doesn't look past Jack like so many others do. Barron looks him straight in the eye and says, "I can give you something, but it's not money." Jack blinks, his mind scrambling to process the words. What does that even mean? Before Jack can say anything, Barron gestures toward a small bench nearby. "Come, sit," he says, his voice soft but firm. "I want to talk to you." Jack stands there, frozen for a moment, unsure whether he's hearing things. Is this a joke? Is Barron playing some game, making fun of him in front of others? But the sincerity in Barron's face gives him pause. It's a look that's not born of pity or disdain. Instead, it's an odd mix of curiosity and something else, something Jack can't quite place. Jack's instincts tell him to refuse. He's been on the streets long enough to know when to trust someone and when to run. But there's something about Barron's calm demeanor that makes him hesitate. Maybe, just maybe, this time things will be different. He walks toward the bench, unsure of what this strange encounter will lead to, and as he sits down, Jack can't shake the feeling that this moment, this conversation, will change everything, for both of them. Jack sits on the bench, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Barron takes a seat next to him, but there's a quiet distance between them, a gap that isn't just physical. Jack can feel it, this invisible barrier, even as they both stare ahead at the bustling street before them. For a moment, neither of them speaks. The sounds of New York swirl around them, honking cars, the chatter of hurried voices, the soft clink of coins from a nearby street musician. Jack's heart thumps in his chest, louder than any of the background noise. He's not sure what to expect from Barron, but one thing is clear. This is no ordinary interaction, and whatever happens next, he's caught in something far bigger than himself. "Why did you stop?" Jack finally asks, his voice quiet but trembling with a mix of confusion and curiosity. Barron turns to him, his gaze steady. "I don't know," he admits, his tone uncharacteristically open. "I've been thinking about things lately, about people like you. I've seen so many of you, and I never really understood. I guess I'm just trying to understand." The words hang in the air between them, unspoken judgments and assumptions rising like fog. Jack shifts on the bench, unsure of how to respond. Barron, privileged, young, and sheltered, wants to understand a life Jack has fought to survive. It feels impossible, like trying to explain the ocean to someone who's never seen a drop of water. Jack shakes his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. "You can't understand it, kid. Not really. You've got your life, your family, your everything. You can't just snap your fingers and change everything with a conversation." Barron's face tightens, but he doesn't back away. There's no defensiveness in his expression, just a quiet determination. "Maybe not, but I'm not going to sit in my privilege and ignore it anymore." He pauses, looking down at his hands as if searching for the right words. "I've seen people like you, and I don't know what's worse, that no one seems to care, or that I've never cared enough to ask." The rawness of Barron's confession hits Jack harder than he expects. It's the first time someone with Barron's wealth and status has looked him in the eye and tried to understand, not just pity him. But even with that, Jack feels a gnawing frustration. This is a conversation, sure, but it's also a reminder. Barron's world is so far removed from his own that the gulf between them can never truly be crossed. "Yeah. Well, it's not just about asking," Jack mutters, looking down at the sidewalk. "You can ask all day long, but unless you've been here, you don't know what it's really like. You don't know what it's like to wake up every morning wondering if it's your last, to wonder if anyone even cares." There's a sharp sting in Jack's voice, a lifetime of pain and loneliness bubbling to the surface. He wants to pull it back, wants to retreat into the indifference he's perfected over the years. But it's too late. Barron has cracked open something inside him that Jack doesn't know how to close. Barron sits silently, taking in Jack's words. Jack notices the flicker of uncertainty in Barron's eyes, and for the first time, he wonders if Barron understands the gravity of what he's just said. The privilege that Barron carries, unearned, unexamined, was never a choice for him. But now, in this moment, Jack can feel the weight of it pressing down on Barron. The distance between them hasn't lessened, but it's changed somehow. Before Jack can speak again, there's a sudden noise, a sharp voice calling from across the street. "Barron, what are you doing over there?" Both men turn. A figure approaches quickly, her heels clicking against the pavement, her face as polished as her expensive designer dress. She's tall, blonde, with a sharp, commanding presence. The air around her shifts, the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Jack recognizes her immediately. Ivanka Trump, Barron's older sister. The way she strides toward them, her eyes narrowing as she takes in the scene, makes Jack's skin crawl. He's suddenly aware of how out of place he is, how their worlds are never meant to overlap. "Barron, what are you doing here?" Ivanka's voice cuts through the air, sharp and disapproving. "You know better than this. Get in the car." Jack can feel the weight of her gaze on him, a dismissive flicker of recognition before her attention snaps back to Barron. It's a moment of pure tension, the fragile peace between Barron and Jack teetering on the edge. Barron's face hardens, a flash of something rebellious sparking in his eyes. For a split second, Jack sees the young man Barron could be, the one who doesn't answer to the weight of his family's expectations. But the moment passes. With a sigh, Barron stands up, brushing the tension from his clothes. "I'll be right there," he says quietly, before turning to Jack. "Take care," Barron mutters, his voice barely above a whisper as he walks toward his sister. Jack watches him go, his heart sinking as Barron gets back in the car, leaving Jack with nothing but the hum of the city around him. It's a small moment of defiance, yes, but it's still not enough. Not for either of them. As the car pulls away, Jack sits back, down on the bench, feeling the weight of his own doubts creeping in. He had hoped, briefly, that something would change today. But maybe he was just fooling himself. What can a single conversation change when the world is still stacked against you? Jack watches the sleek black sedan disappear down the avenue, its polished surface glinting in the winter sunlight. He stands frozen for a moment, the taste of Barron's words still lingering in the air. Take care. A simple sentiment, but one that feels both heavy and fleeting. Jack's fingers twitch, his instincts pulling him back to the streets, back to the survival mode he's perfected. He should have known better than to believe in a moment like that. Nothing ever really changes for people like him. Yet, as he watches Barron's car disappear into the maze of city traffic, something unexpected stirs in Jack's chest. It's not hope. He's learned to discard that years ago, but something like it. A recognition. Barron hadn't just walked away, hadn't dismissed him like all the others. No, Barron had left him with a quiet promise. A flicker of something that Jack can't quite name, but can't shake either. God damn it, Jack mutters under his breath, pulling his coat tighter around his shoulders. I should have said more. A missed opportunity, one that feels almost crushing now. But fate, it seems, isn't done with Jack just yet. As he turns to leave the bench, trying to shake the strange mix of emotions swirling inside him, he hears a voice that instantly cuts through the noise of the city, calling his name. Jack. He freezes. His name is barely a whisper, but it's a sound he knows all too well, even if it's never come from the mouth of someone who's treated him like more than a ghost. Slowly, Jack turns, his eyes searching for the source. And there, standing just a few feet away, is Barron Trump again. But this time, there's something different in his demeanor. Something urgent. I need to talk to you, Barron says, his voice tight with something Jack can't place. There's an intensity in his eyes now, a sharpness that wasn't there before. Jack raises an eyebrow, confusion knitting his brow. What now? I thought you had a family to attend to. His words come out harsher than he intends, a defense mechanism kicking in. After all, why should Barron care now? Why would anyone who's never wanted for anything turn back to someone like him? Barron takes a step closer, his expression shifting from uncertainty to resolve. "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said," he says, the words coming out almost in a rush, "about wondering if anyone cares." He runs a hand through his hair, clearly grappling with something internal. "The thing is, I don't really know what to do with that. But I know I can't walk away. Not now. Not after hearing you." Jack feels the sting of something hot in his chest, something he hasn't allowed himself to feel in a long time. Vulnerability. He takes a step back, his eyes narrowing. "And what exactly do you think you can do? You've got your life. I've got mine. I'm sure your dad's got some bigger things for you to focus on." Barron's eyes flicker with frustration but then soften. "You're right. My life's been decided for me. But I don't want to just sit back and pretend it doesn't matter anymore. And I can't go back to that world without doing something that matters." The words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. There's no arrogance in Barron's voice now, no sense of entitlement, just raw, unfiltered honesty. It's as if Barron is finally shedding the skin of his privilege, staring down the reality of his own apathy, and realizing it's not enough. Jack feels a strange tension building in the pit of his stomach. He's used to being the one who fights, for every inch of ground. But Barron? He's just a kid. A kid who's now looking at him like Jack holds the answers to something he can't even name. For the first time in a long while, Jack feels something stir. Something more than just the instinct to survive. It's a quiet flicker of something deeper. And before he knows it, the words tumble out of his mouth before he can stop them. "All right. I don't know what you think you're trying to do, but let's see if you're serious about it." Barron's eyes widen, his expression softening. "I am." Jack stands still for a moment, digesting the words, the weight of the decision hitting him all at once. There's no going back now. Whatever this strange connection is, whatever this unpredictable, life-altering thing Barron has sparked, it's already pulling him in. Jack's path, once so clear and filled with nothing but survival, is now tangled with Barron's. And for the first time in years, Jack feels a strange, terrifying thing stir inside him. Hope. The city hums around them, oblivious to the quiet storm unfolding on the sidewalk. Jack and Barron walk side by side, the air between them thick with unspoken words. Barron has insisted on taking Jack to his family's penthouse, not to offer charity, not to rescue him, but because he's finally realized that the walls around his life need to come down. But Jack, despite the tug of something more, can't help the skepticism that churns in his gut. "You sure about this?" Jack asks, his voice a low rasp. "You don't know what you're getting into, kid." Barron glances at him, his jaw tight. "I'm sure." They enter the lobby of the Trump Tower. The marble floors gleam, and the scent of expensive perfume lingers in the air. It's the kind of place Jack's never imagined stepping into. He's a ghost here, a relic of a world he's never been part of. Yet Barron walks beside him with a quiet determination, refusing to let the vast wealth surrounding them make him retreat. Once inside the elevator, Barron presses the button for the top floor. The doors close, and the silence between them deepens. Jack shifts uncomfortably, his mind racing. What could Barron possibly want from him? What could a man like him, whose life is defined by excess, hope to learn from someone like Jack? Someone whose every day is a struggle. When the doors open, the sprawling penthouse comes into view. Floor-to-ceiling windows reveal a skyline bathed in the fading orange glow of sunset. But for Jack, all the luxury, all the wealth in the world doesn't matter. His eyes are fixed on Barron, who stands still, his gaze steady. "Listen," Barron says, his voice cracking slightly, as if a dam inside him is beginning to break. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this. But I can't just pretend anymore. I need to know. What do you need?" Jack looks around the room, taking in the stark contrast between Barron's world and his own. For a moment, he feels that familiar sting of bitterness, that ache of never belonging to a place like this. But then he meets Barron's eyes, sees the sincerity there, and something in him shifts. "What do I need?" The question hangs in the air, heavy and loaded. Jack swallows hard. For the first time, he realizes the answer isn't about money or even about survival. It's about something deeper. "I need to know I'm not invisible," Jack says, his voice thick with emotion. "That someone really sees me." Barron stands silent for a moment, processing the words, and then slowly, deliberately, he steps forward and places a hand on Jack's shoulder. "I see you," Barron says, and in that moment, Jack feels something he hasn't in years. The weight of being seen, of being acknowledged. It's not the ending Jack expected, but it's a beginning. The evening stretches on, and the two men sit in the vast penthouse, a silence between them that feels oddly comforting now. The weight of the city below, the shimmering lights, the glass and steel of Barron's world, it all fades away in the face of a simple truth. Barron sees Jack, not as a charity case or an obstacle, but as a human being. For Jack, it's a revelation that's almost impossible to fully process. There's no grand gesture, no miracle unfolding before them. Instead, it's a quiet shift, a recognition that things don't need to be perfect to be meaningful. In the days that follow, Barron keeps his word. He helps Jack find resources, a place to start over. But it's not the money, not the clean clothes or the shelter that transforms Jack, it's the sense of possibility. For the first time in a long time, Jack feels like he might have something to offer beyond his past. A life that isn't defined by survival, but by the potential for change. In return, Barron is forced to confront the rawness of life outside his bubble. He spends more time in places he once overlooked, the parks, the shelters, the streets. He starts talking to people, listening in a way he never did before. He learns that empathy isn't a switch that you can flip. It's something you have to nurture, to live with, to grow into. One evening, Jack sits on a park bench again. This time, not as a beggar, but as a man trying to reclaim his life. He glances at his phone and sees a message from Barron. "Got a new spot for you tomorrow. Let's talk about what comes next." Jack's fingers hover over the screen for a moment, then he types back, "Thanks, kid." There's no doubt that their worlds will never fully merge. Barron's life will always be different from Jack's, just as Jack's struggles will never be Barron's. But in that moment, they've shared something precious. An understanding that transcends wealth, status, or circumstance. As Jack stands to leave the bench, the city around him feels different somehow. The people passing by don't seem as distant anymore, and the lights up ahead don't feel as unreachable. He walks away with a renewed sense of self, a simple truth in his heart. Sometimes, the smallest moments can change everything.